And good afternoon for all those who are in the Middle East and around Europe and Africa and the central region of the world. And good morning for those who are in America and the Pacific region. And good afternoon also for those who are in the Eastern region, right? It's almost noon there. So it's been a good day, and today's Monday, and we are very lucky to have you, Diana Ideus, the president of Houghton Union, and actually an MCC coach from ICF. And she's actually with us here in the Money Conversations. Glad to have you here, Diana.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And this is our second episode. We started scratching the surface of talking about financials and money. And actually, today we are having a very interesting, discussion. And I hope it's all about, the limiting beliefs about money and finance. And actually, this is something that I was actually working on myself the past few days. I had something like a 5 days masterclass with someone who was actually talking about money and manifesting money and getting fulfilling your financial objectives. And actually she started with asking about your beliefs around money, and I was surprised actually when I was working. So and I believe that there are lots of common themes. I will just talk about the limiting beliefs around money that really block people from actually thinking about it properly and putting it in a correct way, and actually working on what they call it on financial objectives and seeking them, and actually working on adjusting their relationship with finance. So what do you see around this, Diana? So what is
Yeah,
yours?
absolutely. So, I think as coaches, we say limiting beliefs and we know what that means. But limiting beliefs is essentially something that we believe is true and often believe is truth, but then that can potentially stop us. So, part of what we do as coaches is whether it's about money or any topic, is look at that and say, something like, what if that wasn't true? So, I know we're going to go through some of them one by one. So, I won't kind of take it away, give too much of a preview there. But it's looking at the things we believe to be true, especially around money, which lead us to not talk about it or potentially not pursue it, or help us. Sometimes limiting beliefs help us feel secure and safe, and that's something that a lot of people crave. But I think part of our role as coaches and our role as fiscally responsible people and business owners and business leaders is to take a look at that and take a look at our beliefs and our trust and the emotions that are there, and then also looking at the financial aspects of that.
And this is something, when I was actually writing down my notes and exploring myself, it didn't feel comfortable at all. And I was amazed of things. Where did this come from? I know logically and cognitively that this is wrong. I challenged myself even while I was writing them, because they're not right. But however, it's there.
They feel true, right? It feels, sometimes it feels right, or it feels like going against them could be wrong.
Yes, that's it. So I know that they're wrong. No, I know them. I know they're wrong, but I'm still working against them. It's not as easy as I thought, because they're deeply rooted, and they've been, in a way, working and against me in some situations. And maybe I will start with the biggest, one, which is, money is ungodly.
Yeah.
So it's something that's it's somehow we look like we look at money as if it is something. Rich people are not really good people. I mean, there's somehow there is a polarity between spirituality and having proper finance, and this is something I know in the core is not correct, because we have many role models in our history and our traditions that were people who really had great and amazing relationship with money, and actually they were really good doers, and they were and they were even, so in a way I believe I challenge myself in this, but however I know it's something, and I believe it comes to you a lot in your clients, right? So what do you say about that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a big one. You're starting with the big one,
Yeah.
but I I think that sometimes people get distracted by money, and instead, if you look at abundance, because I do not believe abundance is, that abundance is ungodly. And I also think money is a scapegoat. I mean, we're really talking about paper and metal that are imbued with symbolism. So ultimately, it looks at, yes, there are people who abuse money, and there are people who don't do good things because they have money. but there are also people who don't do good things because they don't have money. And so it's not actually the money. It's also kind of like, weapons. A tool can be used as a weapon, to help create a fire or help prepare a meal. That tool, so a knife, for example, a knife can be used in everyday cooking. We need that to be able to nourish ourselves. If there was an intruder, a knife can be used for protection. It's not the knife's fault. The knife is a tool. The knife in the hands of a person who intends good and who does good, a knife is a potentially life-saving and protecting and nourishing tool. In the hands of someone who intends harm or does not have good intentions, then the knife is very dangerous. But we don't say that knives are ungodly. There's an understanding of the fact that it's the person and the person yielding the knife and what the person is doing with that and their intent. There's an understanding. But when it's a gun or when it's money, all of a sudden those conversations change. So, on the money is ungodly, I go back to the first episode where it's Sister Irene Krauss, no margin, no mission. It's difficult to make an impact if you don't have funding and you don't have resources. Even if money is not the answer, if a community needs food or water, or power, someone still has to pay for that. Someone still has to kind of get that there. That is the society that we live in. So the money is in there somewhere. So if we say like, oh, it's ungodly, well, then what are you putting in the contribution plate as it gets passed, right? Who's paying for the place where you worship to be upkeeped? So I would argue, I'm not saying that people don't do terrible things in the name of money because they have or they don't, but I don't believe that's the money's fault. That's our use or misuse of a resource. And I believe that, as far as ties to spirituality, I think that for someone to say, oh, I'm spiritual or I'm a healer and therefore I don't have money and I can't ask for money is part of sometimes why those in faith-based and healing professions, that it's not sustainable and they actually have to leave it and go do something else.
Yeah, and actually sometimes, the conspiracy theorists, they look at, that religion, the religious people or healers who ask people to pay money and actually try to make some sort of, expenditures, to make the spiritual place, a good place and actually welcoming and hosting the people. They look at religion as a kind of control, that it asks people to be poor, and in the same time it holds money in the spiritual places. While it's their beliefs, and here there's something that you told me before, that people normally talk about money from their perspective, not from the systemic perspective.
Yeah, because the thing is that if you say that I'm corrupt because I charge for my services, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good with what I charge. It allows me to make my living. It allows me to serve. It allows me to have resources to support others who are in need. Someone saying that my comfort level with money has to do with my faith or with my values, that's usually because they're uncomfortable. So people have a tendency to project. So I put that out there for, there is a way that people who care about finances or financial gain get labeled and judged. But at the same time, a lot of those people who are labeling and judging, they have their own challenging relationships with money that they may not be facing.
Yeah, and it's really a sad story when you say this. Actually, in a way, I may have been in this in this trap, and the second one is something that really was working in the in a big way with me. This is one of my biggest favorites. Money spoils people. It makes the kids, especially the dependents, spoiled brats. And I believe that it's not only in home and my children. I'm looking at my children, or somebody looking at the kids in the society or the teens or whatever. Some people also as managers and leaders in organizations, when their organizations get more prosperous and receives more money, they consider that giving more money to their, and upgrading their pay scales or pay grades, it will spoil people also.
Mhm.
They may go actually, so instead of, sharing this prosperity, they hoard the resources, or maybe open for themselves new businesses or whatever, and actually start looking at it so this.
Mhm.
How do you like this one? And this one is my my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what's interesting is we're talking about prosperity, we're talking about greed, we're talking about abundance and generosity. All of those things are just things that like money evokes and reactions that people have. And it is true that oftentimes, if people get a pay increase every year, that they will potentially feel entitled to a pay increase, like whether they deserve it or not. Like I came here, I always get my increase, I should get my increase. Like, it's if the sun comes up every morning, of course we want it to keep coming up every morning, and we whine if it's rainy, or so I think that there is a desire at core to be safe and cared for and valued. And if people don't stay in a place of ownership and gratitude, then they can feel entitled. Like, we're talking about entitlement, I think. And that's not an attractive thing. But I would argue that sometimes people who don't have money and therefore steal because they're like, well, I don't have money, I don't have resources, so I'm going to steal from these people. That's entitlement too. Just how people who have money and, think like, hey, I'm better than you because I have money, that is also entitlement. But again, it's the same thing with the knife, right? It's not the knife's fault. It's not the money's fault. This is kind of the human reaction. And I would argue, what role is that person's family or society or community playing to ensure that there's a strong sense of values, ownership, service, gratitude, humility, as opposed to saying like, oh, X number of dollars makes you bad or good? Because a lot of times when people need something in this world or want to make an impact in this world that is grounded by and fueled by money somehow, I'm not saying it's the only resource, but it is an important one. And I think just saying, oh, money would make me spoiled and make my family spoiled, it can be a silver lining or a place of comfort to help with the shame of not having the money that you want to support your family. And I am not against that as a coping mechanism, right? Because it is difficult for parents and for companies when they can't provide for their employees. But but it is a belief. It's not necessarily the truth. That's a belief.
So it's as maybe before starting this, you said this kind of, it's a security blanket, something like I feel not achieve what I need to achieve because I'm spiritually clean, or some because I'm not spoiled, because I'm having a good, maybe God is protecting my kids from being spoiled, or being spoiled brats, so it's
Yeah.
like a coping mechanism, it's a defense, so.
I challenge that because and I know some people will say that's blasphemous because I challenge that, but I do challenge that because you know I feel like if you have enough, I'm not talking about being the richest or throwing money around or anything like that, but if you have enough and money is not concerned, you can focus on your faith or your spiritual practice without worrying that your power is going to go out, or without worrying about not having enough food or enough to provide your. So to me, I think it's interesting because there's a way that it's like, if this then, right? Which is actually an Excel formula. But it's like, if I have money, I am not spiritually clean. But it's part of coaching is we look at limiting beliefs and say, hey, is that true? What if that wasn't true? Is there another way you want to look at that? So all I'm saying is, can you be spiritually clean and have money and have abundance? I say yes. So my quality of life is different than someone who says no. It's just, to me, it's about being open to the possibilities. And if you're saying money is dirty, money is bad, then you're closing a door on financial abundance.
Yeah. And here comes, the next one, which is manifesting money,
Hmm.
what is exactly there are two extremes. One of them is that I'm not responsible at all. Whatever result that comes in, I'm just working. I'm taking, my chances. Whatever comes is I'm receiving. I'm on the receiving end. I cannot control it because it's something that comes in from God, and this is one extreme. Okay, so I just have to do whatever I have to do daily, and I'm not questioning the results. Okay, and on the other side, there is another school that tells you have to actually attract money. You have to focus on manifesting money and looking at putting the life that you want, with the trips that you want. You have to imagine the car, this kind of the law of secret, this this kind of the attraction and law of attraction, and this kind of beliefs or philosophy that puts you in a place where you are the one who is responsible of totally of the vision that you create, and the thing, and you have to actually, and it comes back hard on people who don't actually manifest what they actually imagined or visioned. It comes back on them with depression and many other symptoms that are not healthy. So what is the real, the correct, how
Hmm.
can we actually, between both, it's I'm not here or not there, but what is the right way to actually to understand how to put financial targets and work on them, like
Hmm.
any other target.
Yeah. So I think in the spirit of the spectrum and the spirit of, I know we talked about this last time, like current state versus desired state. I think seeing like, hey, where are you now? What are your beliefs around money? How are those serving you or not serving you? And then what would you like to change? And then that, because I don't believe it's the right place for you is not necessarily the right place for me, right? It's something about where where you want to be as far as kind of making money or how important money is. But if you think about it, if you buy a plant from the store and you plant it outside, yes, the sun will shine and the rain will fall. But because you have planted that plant, it's not a natural part of the environment. So, what are you going to do to also serve and protect that plant and make sure that that plant can thrive? Are you going to protect it from animals? Are you going to water it if it needs water? Does it need more light? Do you need to move where it is outside? Is there another plant taking it over? So I think the thing is that I do believe in abundance and I do believe things are provided, but also to just kind of be so hands off and, everything I need will be taken care of for me and I don't need to think about it. I don't think that's responsible. We wouldn't do that to our children to be like, hey, you're born now, you'll be okay. You don't need me to feed you or help you tie your shoes or, anything
Good
like that.
Lord.
It's just like, of course that you've created an entity that you hope that will thrive in the world, but we all need support. So I think the thing is that a lot of times people are like, oh, money is ungodly and money is bad. You're not supporting your mechanisms for abundance in your life. And also, to me, it's not just money, it's also about abundance. So a good friend of mine, um, it's sometimes it's the abundance of having a place to stay if you need to have a place to stay. Or she, when I didn't have a car, I wasn't going to buy a car, but she lent me her car when she was out of the country, right? So sometimes it's just the people, or even how for communities will come together for holidays, or to pitch in when someone loses their home or it's natural disaster or something like that. It doesn't have to be just money, but it's the spirit of, I believe it's the spirit of giving, but there's also a level of ownership and responsibility that needs to happen. If you're always giving to someone and they're always asking, that can also breed resentment, because why are they not taking the ownership and the responsibility that to take care of themselves, right? So if it is a child, there's an expectation that we care for them. If it is a natural disaster, there's a kind of, we know that was not necessarily in someone's control, but there also has to be a responsibility. If a company is always asking for funding and can't show its funders that it is being fiscally responsible with the money or has plans in place to give the funders return on investment, they're not going to keep getting funding. So it's, again, we're coming back to, if you shun a resource for religious or moral or just kind of because you don't want to feel the shame of it reasons, then I would argue if you're shunning it or not looking at it or just hoping that it takes care of itself, are you actually being responsible and giving it what it needs? So one of the things in, for example, the stock market, the American stock market. So Americans are told, like, you don't touch the money, right? You just put it away and you don't look at it because it's going to go up and down and you can't necessarily handle the volatility of the ups and downs. But if you leave it alone, it will take care of itself. Now, thankfully, that's usually what happens. But also, those people who potentially educate themselves and lean into it more and do more research on what have I invested in and what about the leaders of those companies and what's happening in the world that might affect my investments, those are people who can potentially grow their portfolio into something, whereas people who were ignoring it just didn't know what was happening. They weren't looking at it. Now, there are people who take that to a farther extent, right, and are moving things around a lot, and so again, it's looking at, if this is a reason. You don't just buy food once in your fridge and say it'll like there will be food there next time I open the door. You have to go to the store and you have to meal plan and you have to make lists and you have, so I there's a strange way that money as a resource evokes all of these emotional reactions that other resources in our life don't necessarily evoke.
Yeah, that's very true. So actually, it's it's very well articulated. Also, where it comes, like, there is a shared responsibility. And while you are talking now, we're having two extremes also of companies and company leaders who actually put financial target and put it as a burden on the employees and really have the hard line on actually putting hard financial targets that's very stressful, and they're having lots of burnouts, lots of stress, lots of they're looking only at numbers. And other managers who actually hoard the financial information and only ask people for operational objectives and KPIs, translate it into just some operational objectives and just put you did what you have, what is support, and they don't share financial information with their employees. And here, between both, I believe that I worked in both kinds of companies, and in my experience, it was both stressful because one of them was putting too much on you from one side. The other one was actually taking from you the accountability and the shared responsibility. And I want to know how my work is impacting the company growth, the prosperity, how we can contribute in bringing in more cash for the organization and bringing in more financial resources. So I believe that it's the same also in parenting. Some parents hoard financial information from their kids, and they just put them in a very in a good lifestyle and actually keep it sustained even when they're struggling financially on their own. They keep the struggle for themselves. And some other parents, they share too much that the kids are actually outgrown very quickly. They start working from very young ages, and they start making their own money because they always see that there is no abundance, there's always scarcity. So between both there is some sort of a sane place and a moderate place where we have to actually and I'm not sure if you see different patterns working with your clients, whether leaders or individuals working with their families and this.
I think it's important to have awareness. So there's a simple coaching model called ACE, and it stands for awareness, choices, execution. And I think it's very important that we have awareness, like what is my financial health? What do I forecast or believe that I need, right? And having that awareness, it doesn't necessarily even matter how much money that you have. It's just awareness about what are my monthly bills, for the business or for your family. Then what choices do you have? Okay, so I have this much money and this much expense. Do I choose to spend less? Do I choose to save? Is it time to invest? Is it time to have conversations with people who aren't aware that their investing patterns aren't necessarily working? And then with that awareness, then we make new choices, and then we can execute on those choices. I think the hard thing with money, because of the belief potentially that, oh, it makes me a bad person, or it's ungodly, or people with money are bad, people try to skip over the awareness part. But if you don't have the awareness, you're not actually looking at all of your choices. So if you are looking at choices 1 through 7, but you think money is bad, and I don't think money is bad, maybe I have 15 choices and you only have 7. And it's not to say that we won't choose the same thing or pick the same door, but when we think about abundance, I maybe have more options. And when you think about the brain, right, when we are in danger, it's fight, flight, or freeze. Our brain focuses on, how do I save your life? Because it's about survival. But when we're not in that fear-based and survival place, there's other parts of the brain. We're able to think more creatively. We're not having a stress response. So I would argue that a lot of people with their money have an automatic stress response, whether it's because of their own, I don't have enough, or it's usually I don't have enough. And then, layered on top of that, we have like faith and society, and I don't want to be spoiled and things like that. So because of that, all of that is creating a stress response, and then people have less choices. Whereas if we're able to kind of calmly, in a grounded way, say, here's where I am financially, and here's what I think I need for my future, what choices do I have? That's a different level of kind of ownership and responsibility, and calm and creativity, as opposed to, that's when we look at kind of thriving or vitality as opposed to just survival.
Wow, that's very profound. And really, when you're saying this, it shows how the beliefs actually work internally on actually closing the doors. It's as if people are working, and it's always abundant. The choices are many. Sometimes people actually on the other side, they may actually, because of the many choices, they cannot focus.
Sure.
Not exactly, yeah. And I believe that there is a relationship between focus and getting your financial objective, because actually it has, like any target, you have to stay put in the path and stay learning until you reach it without actually distracting yourself with other things. So maybe this will be a good thing, maybe to start our discussion the next episode, when we're having, about the abundance and how we can actually work with different choices, actually, because actually the abundance and focus, and how to adjust ourselves in a abundant mindset and yet focused, because both can work against each other. I believe it's a very tricky thing. But today it was really amazing. Now we're getting down to the end of the 30 minutes. And I believe, Diana, you were very generous in sharing about the limiting beliefs about money and finance. It was really a very rich, and I believe this one, it has to be, we have to go back to it many times to come. It's really, and your experience was really, and your sharing was really very generous. I just want to give you some time to talk about your program, about the next program of finance and gender, that
Great.
you offer in Houghton Union. So please.
Yes, thank you. So, for those of you who are coaches, I do teach coaching classes that are approved by the International Coach Federation. So, in finance and gender, we look at what's coming up for people in relation to their money, and then also how does gender play a role because this is, and how does society play a role. So, we've only had Americans in this class so far. So, my international audience, I invite you to the diversity and the richness. Of course, I love Americans as well, but to actually talk about these things and have a safe space to talk about how does our own relationship with money, and how do we look at money, and then how does that impact how we serve people. And so this is a class specifically for coaches, but I'm always happy to talk to people more about this. I think it's an important thing, and if you don't have the awareness, even if the awareness is uncomfortable, oftentimes the awareness is uncomfortable. If something in our body needs to be addressed, we often have a pain response to it. So it's not, we don't want that pain to be debilitating, but to say, hey, this is a place in my life where I don't feel safe, or I don't know what to do, or I'm uncertain. I think it's important that we have people, whether that's me or someone in your community or in your family, that we have places where it's safe for us to talk about these things, because these are often things that we're facing in community, but people aren't sharing, so they think it's isolation.
Wow. So actually here it comes back again to the trust, safe space, opening discussions, conversations, creating a place where people can actually converse and open up. So, so these are the basic principles of coaching and team coaching, So it's and group coaching. So in a way, I believe that you're doing an amazing job, and actually, thank you for sharing all this wisdom.
Thank
Diana.
you.
I really love how you bring it, how you bring it naturally and fluently. And each and every word you said today was really needs to be framed.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Diana, and for everyone around the world who is listening to us now, either online or recorded. Actually, you can interact with us with putting comments and LinkedIn, or whether it's on other social media, like now it's on YouTube also. So if you want to just leave some comments, we will come back to you in other episodes. And now we can have another episode also, Diana. We can set
Please.
another time for that. Yes. So we will set the time and we will communicate with you, everyone, when it will be our next episode. So I believe that's what will be coming in the next few weeks. Okay.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank you
Diana.
so much.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. And goodbye.